Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Riyadh.
Thank you very much to Brother Allan for spending some time with me today to talk about your involvement in the early days and current days of Nur Ul Islam.
Okay.
So before we get into the actual details, would you mind telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, my name is Allan Baksh. When I was going to school, people called me Aladdin, but only my mother would say Allahuddin. When she calls me Allahuddin, I'm in trouble. She calls my real name. But everybody knows me as Allan Baksh. So I was born in Plaisance, Guyana, and during the civil commotions, we moved from Plaisance into Kitty, where I spent some years in Kitty. We then moved to Campbellville, where I spent many years before I went to England to study. We did the chartered exams in England, and by that time my parents had emigrated to the United States. So instead of going back to Guyana, I came to New York, and I also then, being a chartered accountant, I write the CPA exams, and I was working as a CPA in New York. At that time, I got introduced to my wife, who was living in Florida, and I got married, and I came to visit Florida, so I fell in love in Florida, so I moved, and of course my wife was from Florida. My wife, Najibi, right? She was in Florida, and so I came to Florida after 2 years of marriage in New York. We moved to Florida. Najibi, her parents and family was very much involved in Nur Islam at the time. So when I came here in 1990, right, I got involved. We were just at that time. The land was bought in October 1989, and in 1990, I was invited to a meeting with Brother Yasin Mohammed. He was president at the time. Aziz Sher Mohammed, Brother Yusuf. I was invited to a meeting and was asked to act as secretary at the time. At the same time, we started clearing the land. And it's noteworthy to mention at this time, there were some people who were great stalwarts of Nur Islam. I remember the energy of Sheikh Amir, who unfortunately passed away a year after that. We cleared the land. He didn't get to see his vision. We had Uncle Yasin, of course. He was a dynamo. He's one of our first presidents. They always like him for the practical and pragmatism that he shared. Part of what we are today was much due to him as president of Nur Islam. We had Amir Khan. We had Uncle Ben Ali. We used to call him Duckman. He brought his trucks, and so he was taking away the dirt and the trees and so on. Uncle Amir Khan was driving the bulldozer, and there was lots of other people, but just noteworthy, these were some of the people that, and the entire community came out. So, in the clearing land, there was a jungle, and the clearing land is, I remember fondly, we buried, when we couldn't take any more trees, we buried a whole bunch of trees. We dig a big hole, and we buried a lot of trees where the basketball court is. So when we go there later on, we'll find those trees. I don't know if they're going to become coal or oil by now, but those trees were buried there. I also remember Uncle Aziz insisting on keeping some trees, and we thought, oh, the land looks so clear and nice. Why were we going to keep these trees? It was the jamun trees. And if those jamun trees could talk, they would have a lot of history to Nur Islam. And so those jamun trees, Uncle Aziz said we should leave them, and we left them. And many people enjoyed that over the years, the jamun trees. So that's it. So anyway, once the land was cleared, then you say, what next we're going to do? And at the time, there was a plot. A plot was recorded. Many people did not know about this, right? It was recorded as agriculture, and it was allowed for a religious organization. However, at that time, Palm Avenue was not extended and so on, and there was a limitation of how much square foot you could put on the land. It was only plotted for 1,750 square foot, and then had to be replotted, which would take a long time. So the question was raised, what do we do? And I remember very vividly at a meeting in 1990, Brother Hazrat Khan, who was vice president at the time, said that we can't wait for all these years. We need to put some kind of building and get something going. And he was one of the persons that moved a resolution that we put a building on the property. And that is how that present building was designed as a temporary building. so that we have a place that we can use temporarily, and later on, you know, when the zoning and when we improve the plot notation and get more square footage, we'll build a proper masjid we had planned. So that building was built, and it was going to be a temporary building. It was not designed for the mosque, but Brother Aziz, in his design, you know, he probably had a vision to know we'll need it for 30 years or probably more. And so it was designed, he had a mihrab on it, which is something that distinguishes it as a mosque, right? But we always said that this was going to be a temporary building. And we move on from that. It was going to be two buildings exactly like that. One was going to be the ladies, and one was going to be the men with the lobby in the middle. There was two identical buildings that was designed, however. So anyway, when that passed, somebody, we didn't know this, right? But there was we had other people, Haji Shahid was working with the county, and he was helping us to trying to get the new notation, to increase it from 1750 to a bigger notation. And he had designed a certain configuration for how the mosque and so on. He had ears for bathing the dead, and some people were very happy about that, and so on. And there was a philosophical outlook of the design of where we want to be between him and Aziz. And I remember we had this big meeting till 2 o'clock in the morning at Dr. Khan's house, Dr. Khan's house, whereby we went to resolve which vision we're going to take, right? Aziz had drawn up something, and Haji Shahid, may Allah bless him, and Uncle Aziz also. They had a conflict of where the vision, what kind of building we're going to have. Anyway, the meeting voted unanimously for Aziz's interpretation. He was a builder. Aziz was a builder. He was a big contractor in Guyana, and he had a vision of things. So we went with him. Well, Haji Shahid was a little bit peeved with that, and he washed his hand. But Haji Shahid's brother-in-law, was Uncle Edwin, and both were surveyors, right? Unbeknownst to us, Uncle Edwin was working with a big company, a surveying company, engineering company. And quietly, and I was treasurer for many years, I didn't even know this. But this gentleman quietly, right, went and he worked with the architects and so on, and with his company, and he got the square footage increase from 1750, right, to 19,500 square foot. So he got it, and this is we were blessed, Salam, bless these people, who work quietly, nobody know about them, right? To get things done for them. And there are many others. There are many benefactors that I know. At the time when the land was purchased, right? They gave 50,000. When we started the temporary building there, they gave 80,000. And they didn't want to show their names or anything like that. These are the people that still people don't know about these people. But we always had these people. But coming back to another important thing apart from that aspect of it, was the next big thing that make Nur Islam where we are today, was our constitution. When Uncle Hassan was president in 89, 90, he had started a process of updating the constitution. It was a basic document that was filed with the Florida Department of Corporations to incorporate the business. But they didn't have a lot of details of how we function and all that. And so he started it. It went with Brother Carl Ali, right? He started to do something. But it really became fruition is when Brother Yusuf Muhammad got involved, right? And he did a very detailed draft of it, right? And he presented the draft to the executives, and we had many debates and arguments back and forth. We had a constitutional conference. We had people like Brother Azim Yunus, who was a real scholar and arguer, and he would go 9 yards. And we had words. Every word were careful. For example, in the Constitution, it said we shall raise funds by all legal means, right? Well, what is legal in USA is not necessarily legal for Muslims. For example, lotteries, and all, you can raise funds by lotteries and raffles and so on. It's legal, but it's not halal. And so if you see in the Constitution, you'll see a word, right, that says we shall raise funds by all halal, legal, and you put a bracket, halal means. And so everything we fought, and that was the beauty of what we got with the Constitution, because we had many debates back and forth, what we wanted. And then there was this question, the fundamental thing about Nur Islam, it was democracy. So we all came from Guyana and probably Trinidad, but especially from Guyana, where we had a dictatorship. We all left Guyana because there was a dictatorship that ruined the country. And so we were very passionate about democracy, and we wanted democracy to be a fundamental part of the Constitution.
Yeah.
We didn't want to have a board of trustees that last 10 years or 50 years or lifetime.
Yeah.
It was against our philosophy or DNA. So we wanted the democracy to be a big part of our Constitution with checks and balances and so on. But there's a problem with democracy, because by this time we had land. We had a 4-acre land, and now we become a valuable thing.
Yeah.
And I always remember Brother Assad, Uncle Assad, he used to say, people don't throw stick at sand cocoa tree. In other words, he meant when you don't have anything, people don't bother you. But when you have something, people come after you.
Yeah.
So there was also a rumor that another organization was going to come, other communities would come and vote us out and take over the land.
Okay.
So people were very paranoid about that.
Yeah.
So that then evolved to say, well, how can we protect this land to get the vision of the so-called people, the founding people of this? And that's when it was decided that we'll have 2 classes of membership. One would be founding members, and one would be associate members. And those who were in existence at the time when the land was bought and would be called founding members. And those who came after would be called associate, with all rights and privileges. But the founding members were responsible for the vision and the thing of the organization, and they were the ones entitled to choose the leadership of the organization, right? So there was 2 classes of membership at that time, which was somewhat tedious from an Islamic standpoint. But that was the way they thought they would protect the organization from being taken over by having elections and being taken over by other groups, right? And in the founding members, you did have people from mainly from the Caribbean, of course, but you did have people from, like, for example, from South Africa. You had Ustad Beg, you had Tafikul Chowdhury, they have different people, but it was a minority, but the majority were people of the founding members from the Caribbean. So that was a famous Caribbean clause in the Constitution, which was always troublesome. Anyway, but apart from that, the Constitution was done. I remember when we were going to take it to the general body meeting, and that was another thing where we had our beloved Haji Dean and Haji Shahid had come that day of the election, and then in ratification of the Constitution, right? And Haji Dean felt that we should use the Quran as our Constitution, right? And we are beloved, and may Allah bless him. He's our dear. He's the Imam of Imams, you know. But we couldn't agree with Haji Dean. And Haji Dean made a speech, and then and then you had to put it to a vote if you're going to use the Quran or the Constitution, the man-made Constitution, right? But the Constitution does say in the preamble, the first word, that this organization shall be governed by the authority of the Quran and authentic Sunnah. And that was a premonitory. Anything that violates that would be in the thing. So we felt that the Quran says that when people get together in a contract or so on, they should write it down. That's in the Quran. When it not only mean business, but an agreement among people. And so the Constitution was an agreement of the people there, as how we would govern ourselves and so on. So it's formed as a contract. So we thought it wasn't in conflict with the Quran. Anyway, it was passed. But the Constitution is one of the things that I believe that kept us for all these years together, because it did promulgate rules and checks and balances and so on. For example, there were 3 arms of government if you look at the Constitution. There is the Board of Trustees, there is the Executive Council for the management of the organization, and then there's the Imam in charge of Islamic affairs. And each group had its own responsibilities. For the executives were the administrators, they're running the masjid, collecting the money, building the buildings and so on. The Board of Trustees was overlooking the executives to make sure they do not violate the Constitution and violate rules and stuff like that. And the Imam was totally involved in all Islamic matters, right? And therefore he had a full authority, and if there's any conflicts between what we're doing, he would be the person to bring that up. And then there's also the checks and balances. For example, if there was a conflict in interpretation between the executives and trustees on a matter, right, then that matter would go to the Imam as arbitrator, and his decision shall be final. If there was a difference in the election of executives at the meeting, then that will go to the Board of Trustees, and their decision is final. If there was when time for the trustees election, if there was a dispute there, it would go to the Executive Council, and their decision is final. So there is There's no case of going to the courts to settle dispute.
Yeah.
It was all within the Constitution.
Yeah.
It was all within the duties of the president.
Yeah.
The duties of the secretary and treasurer and everybody was all there. It was clearly laid out.
Yeah.
The duties of the imam was laid out. The duties of the board of trustees. When we have elections, what the eligibility of members, members' right to have a hearing, right? All that was there. And also the vision of what the organization is was also all there in the Constitution. So all these, this is what I believe in my heart, is what kept us all these years without, we had disputes, we have many, many disputes, right? But that is the thing, the fundamental thing that kept us. Another thing that kept us in the Constitution, you have certain rules. But over the years, after we built the first building there, right, and we move on, there's a question of what we do next, right? And do we build a mosque with a hall, or do we build, school buildings and so on? People are saying that a mosque with a hall would only be used on weekends, right? On Friday when we do gym and so on. And there's a certain young Turks, and I probably was coming to that time, it's a long time ago, I felt that we needed more than that. We needed a vision of Nur Islam, right? And this is somewhat in contradiction with some of our oral members who had, time would say they wanted a masjid and they pray, and alhamdulillah, they didn't get to see a masjid, and we're working at that now, but at the time, they wanted to have a masjid, and we said we had a masjid there already. So at that time, there was no Muttaqeen, there was no Mu'mineen, there was no IMOF, there was no Darul Uloom. Nur Islam was that one big organization at the time. And so, because of the differences between the vision of Nur Islam, between the old school and the young school, we had this meeting, right? I think it was in 1993, right? And literally at the time, we had more than 1,000 members on site. Imagine 1,000 people in the big open land at the back, right? There are going to vote, and we have two different sections of the vision of where we want Nur Islam to be, right? And it was at that meeting where we promulgate the vision of Nur Islam that say where we want. And this is a vision statement that if you go to our website and so on, there's a vision statement here. And this is what the vision statement that was promulgated, that where we want to take Nur Islam. And that vision statement is still there, and this is what we follow over the years. And at that point in time, the election was so close, between 1,000 and something people, only 12, it was a difference of 12 between the two factions that decided where we want to be. And that was where we see. At that time, Dr. Khan was leading as the so-called Young Turks, right? And then the other side, we had Haji Amir and some other people on the other side there. And so by that now, it was decided that so Dr. Khan became president to lead the vision for where we want to be, right? You had myself as treasurer. You had Carl Haji Dean. We had made up with Haji Dean, and he came back as vice president. You had Carl Ali. We had Carl Ali. We had Saud. We had Shirad. We had a whole bunch of executives that came there and so on. And then we started to prosecute the new vision of where we want to think, right? So at that time, we didn't have no school or anything like that, right? We decided to we had the 19,000 square foot approved by that time. So we had the model units come in, and may Allah bless Haji Shahid. We had made up by that time. Haji Shahid came. That's the thing about Nur Islam, everybody, and that's our greatness, that everybody worked for the cause of Nur Islam. So Haji Shahid was still working with the county, and he helped us get the model units at the back. And then we started, that was mainly for the Sunday school, right? For the Sunday school. And that's when, at the same time, IMOF was involved in teaching and so on. You had Sheikh Munir, Imam Nasib, Brother Mansour and so on. They were all part of the IMF. And their feature was education. They were experts in religious education. So we make a deal with them. We said, listen, we are one big organization. You come and take over the madrasa, and you guys run the madrasa, right? And so that's where IMF came, and they were very professional and so on to run the madrasa. And Brother Mansour was all part of that. Anyway, so then we said, well, it's such a waste that we have these two nice units there. I mean, not utilizing it only on weekends. We need to do something more. right? When Dr. Khan was also, at the time we always say it was part of our vision, we can build schools and all these other things, right? We put it in our manifesto, by the way. We had a manifesto when we went to that election, a whole big manifesto saying what we're going to do and all that. And so we feel obligated that we need to honor these manifesto with Dr. Khan leading the charge on that. So myself and Dr. Khan said charge. We went to, there was a sister, Sister Tilat. We were looking to form a school, Islamic school. We said, why we do that? Sister Tilat has a Islamic school with toddlers and so on.
Okay.
So myself and Dr. Khan, we went to meet with Sister Tilat, right? And we talked about, how we can form a school, and she would be interested in coming, bringing her, at that time, was bringing her school to the property, right? To actually bring our school, we would lease the property to her, one of the units. But it evolved more than then. We did a business plan. I was part of the team to do the business plan for the school. Myself, we had Brother Mansour and Sister Talat. We had a three-man committee that prepared the business plan for the school. So we prepared the business plan, we took it to the executive, and one of the fundamental things of the business plan was to say that the school was going to be independent but accountable. And that principle still stands there. We give the school the independence, but it's accountable to Nur Islam. And at the time also, we were worried about, people worried about liability and so on. So I incorporated a company, the Nur Islam Academy. But before we did that, we always want to honor Sheikh Amir, because we were so sad that he was one of the stalwarts at the time, that he didn't get to see the vision. He passed away before he saw what it is. And we wanted to name the academy the Sheikh Amir Academy. But the family thought it was political, they didn't want us to do that. So we kind of saved it. And so we call it Sheikh Nur Islam Academy. And at that point in time, the committee that we had, I thought that we need to make it bigger, because it's just a three-man committee, and we need to bring it to get thing. And that was one of the things we did, because the committee didn't want to, we don't want to just have three people, but I thought that we need to have a bigger board of directors, right, with caliber people. And that's when, in fact, when I incorporated the Academy's corporation, and we had, our chairman of the board was, Brother Assad was the chairman of the trustee, so we put him as president. We put Dr. Khan as vice president. Yusuf was secretary, and I was treasurer when I formed that corporation there. And then we said, now Brother Yusuf got involved now, right? And we need to get again, he's our constitution guy, right? He's Mr. Constitution. So Yusuf brought with the bylaws again, mirroring somewhat of Nur Islam, right? Making it independent but accountable. That was always our goal. And so we had that drafted up. And then to make the academy get credibility, we went around there, South Florida, and brought aboard people of caliber. You have Dr. Tapia, right? You had Brother Assad, a well-known businessman and so on. You had Dr. Khan, you had myself, you had Mufti Hassan, right? You have Pampano Masjid, Imam Hassan Sabri, Sunrise Imam, it's slipping my name there. So we bring on all these people because it was going to be for the entire community, South Florida Muslim community. And that brought us a lot of credibility. I remember the first day we opened the academy, right? There were 16 kids, right? The first day, thing, of which 8 was from my family. My wife was thinking I was crazy to pull out my kids from my public school and send them there, which she got the bottom house, It reminded me of the old days in Guyana, when Dr. Jagan formed the university, and they used to call it Dr. Jangan Bottom House. But that was the thing at the time. People at the time when we were doing this now said, there was election time, came back again. And people accused me of one of the people that we form a private school for my children and stuff like that, and all sorts of things letters were written and so on. And we had another election again, another contested election to change the vision. But again, we went back this time when we won, right? And by the time we started to prosecute our vision. So the school moved on from there, from strength to strength. And so the next thing we thought was we start building the elementary school building, and then the administration building, and then from there on it went on to other things. So that's a fun story about that also. Thanks for asking me about that. So we had Aziz Uncle Aziz as a contractor, and he had given an estimate to build a school. It was the first building, what we call the old masjid, or the what's going to be now the library. He had $180,000, and the contract went to the executive council and so on, and people were very hesitant to get that to proceed, because we didn't have that. We only had $20,000 in the bank account at the time. So Uncle Yasin, again, a can-do person, right? The secretary at the time didn't want to sign the contract, so he came, me and him signed the contract to proceed with that project, because nobody wanted to be responsible for it and be liable and whatever. Anyway, just shortly after that, Uncle Yasin, he was president, we had a benefactor, right? And these are the big things people don't know. This benefactor came forward. I don't know if I can call his name. He probably should, because he's passed away. And this is when Brother Yasin, Norman Yasin, came up with $80,000, right? And he was going to give that a donation, which is a big boost for us. And that, with other contributions, Dr. Khan, was another big benefactor at the time, right? Amisa Abdul, and some other people. There was something that come to mind at this time. And with that, we were able to, struggle and raise funds. And not to forget, it's a small thing, but all our sisters, Sister Zenora, Sister Zabida, my wife, and different people, with every Sunday, they would have a breakfast program. And this is small amounts, but you know what? It was a conviction that kept it going. And this is some of the things that, we raised funds in earlier days, And just as a fun thing, I remember the first thing that we did was building the gate. And there was a controversy over that, because when we finished, we were going to build a gate. We had an estimate for that, and they want to know why it's going to cost. We thought the gate was going to cost $2,000-3,000. It ended up like $30,000 or something like that. I can't remember the exact amount. And people were saying, "Oh, how could it cost so much?" But we never envisaged that we would have the kind of entrance, those concrete structures and pillars, that was going to hold up a gate that will last 100 years, because it's been 30 years. And that steel gate is still going strong despite everything else. So there was other controversies like that, but we were blessed that all through this time, we had people who were sincere. I always remember we made many pitfalls, and we had many things that difficulties with the city and areas. But I always remember Brother Yusuf used to say, Allah always bless us, because we have good and sincere people working. And there were so many sincere and good people working in Nur Islam that get us to this point.